Good afternoon and warm greetings to all invited guests, dignitaries, participants, colleagues, and friends. On behalf of Kandalushala, an institution dedicated for higher learning and research in ancient wisdom, welcomes you to the National Lecture Series on Indian intellectual traditions. Today, we have with us two eminent scholars to lead today's sessions. Professor Srikala M. NAIR, who is the professor at the Sree University for Sanskrit, Kalady, and Professor Godavari Shah Mishra, Professor of Indian Institute of Technology, Bhubaneswar, who will chair this section. Let me welcome and invite the Master of Ceremony for today's section, Dr. Ajidan, the faculty member of Kandalushala. Over to Dr. Ajidan.
Let us start with an invocation. I invite Dr. Sarita Maheshwaran for the invocation recital.
Shivashakrya yukto yadi bhavati shakrah prabhavitum nache devam devo na khalu kushalaspandidumapi atastvamadhyam harihara virinjadibhirapi pranantum stodum va kathamakrita punya prabhavati saraswatya sukriramridalahari kaushalahari pibandya sharvani shravana chulukabhyam aviralam chamatkara shlagha chalita shirasah kuntalagano jhanatkarai starai prativachanamachashtaivate Pradipajwalabhirdivasakara nirajanvidhi sudhasute chandropalajalalai arghyarajana swakiyairambobi salilanidhi sauhityakaranam Twadiyabhirvakbhi tava janani vajam studiriyam Twadiyabhirvakbhi tava janani vajam studiriyam.
Thank you, Sarita ma'am. Good afternoon to all. I am so proud and privileged to welcome you all to the function. As you probably know, this is the 10th lecture in the lecture series on Indian intellectual tradition conducted by Kandalushala, an Institute for Higher Learning and Research in Ancient Indian Wisdom. Today, we have with us Srikala M. NAIR, Professor of Department of Philosophy, Sri Sankaracharya University of Sanskrit, Kalady, and former professor of Nalanda University, to speak on Indian epistemology in conversation with its Occidental counterpart, problems and prospects. Professor Srikala has many feathers to her cap, and I am not going into all the details because every single achievement of her is given in the program notice. But I would like to say in general that she is one of the leading academics of her field. She is one of close associates of our director Murali Madhavan sir and a lover of Sanskrit. Today, she is going to deliver a lecture on impinging issues in Indian epistemology, placing it on the global canvas and bringing it in conversation with its Western counterpart. On behalf of Kandalushala, I welcome Professor Srikala to the function. Welcome to you, ma'am. Dr. Godavari Mishra, Professor, School of Humanities, Social Science and Management, Indian Institute of Technology, Bhubaneswar, will be presiding over the function. So let me welcome Godavari Mishra to this academic event. Welcome to you, sir. No speaker is a speaker without audience. So let me welcome all who gathered here online to grace the occasion. Welcome you all. Thank you. So next is presidential address. So I invite Godavari Mishra ji for his presidential address.
सदाशिव समारंभां शंकराचार्य मध्यमां अस्मदाचार्य पर्यन्तां वंदे गुरु परंपरा। ईश्वरो गुरुरात्मेति मूर्तित्रय विभागिने व्योमवद् व्याप्त देहाय दक्षिणामूर्तये नमः। I'm very happy that I have this opportunity to be associated with this lecture series, which is presided by none other than my good friend and the inheritor of a great legacy of Sanskrit studies in Kerala, Professor Murali Madhavan, and also have the privilege to listen to one of my dear friends with whom I have had the opportunity to interact for such a long time, that is Dr. Srikalan NAIR. I must say I'm very proud that she has stepped up as a philosopher, worth the name in this country, and keeping the torch of the light of philosophy glowing in the part of Kerala, which has had such a great tradition of philosophizing. Friends, today we have the talk by Dr. Srikalan, who is going to speak on the epistemology Indian and with its interaction or with its affinity with the Western epistemology. Coming from Radhakrishnan Institute of Advanced Study in Philosophy, where we both were there at one point of time, she as a student, I was a young lecturer. Like we know, and those who are associated with this institute also know how much philosophizing was done there and how, with what seriousness it was done there by persons starting from Professor T.M.P. Mahadeva. So I must say that philosophy East and West, which was the center at Hawaii, had a replica in our place in Chennai, and we grew up there, and I am again happy and appreciate the activities done by Dr. Sreekala in preservation and promotion of that tradition in different ways. Friends, let me go to the topic. How much time I have, Professor Murali Madhavan? 5 minutes, sir. How much time? Professor? How much time?
You can take 20 minutes, sir.
Okay, thank you. 20 minutes will be very good for me. Yeah. Like, the whole word darshanam, as it is the nearest translation of philosophy, what we mean in the West, is a term which is rooted in the tradition of epistemology, pramana vichara in our in Indian philosophy. I would like to start my presidential address with a story, not a story. This is what happened when I went to, Kailasa Ashram in Rishikesh. Kailasa Ashram is known for the preservation, promotion, and continuity of Indian philosophy, especially Advaita Vedanta, grammar, NAIR, and other branches. And when I went there, I went there to buy some books more than seeing the ashram. And the person who was there in the book shop, he asked me, "Where are you coming from?" I told, "I come from Madras, and I want to buy these are the books." Then he asked, "What is the book you want to buy?" I told, "Vedanta Paribhasa." He told, "What type of a text Vedanta Paribhasa is?" Like all it is in Hindi and Sanskrit going on, I don't want to get into that type of a conversation because I want to tell quickly what happened. Then I told, "It is a Pramana Grantha." Then he told, he asked me, why, what is Pramana? Then he told, what is Prama? Then I told, this is what is Prama. I asked him one question, Prama, which system? You are asking from which system, which school you would like me to talk about Prama? He was not expecting such an answer from me. And when I selected the books, he told, "Professor Mishra, you take those books, don't have to pay anything. Like books must be, it must be more than 1,000 rupees of books I bought." He told, he did not take money. He told, "It is all free, gifted to you. You have come here, taken the, interacted with me. This is all for you." See, that is why I am telling you, is in wherever this scholastic tradition is alive, there is an appreciation. And this appreciation was it was all around in every part of the country, and more so in Kerala. And Dr. Murali Madhavan, I'm very happy that Kantalur is doing this. And I don't know how long it will last. I hope it will last, since the tradition has lasted for more than 3,000-4,000 of years. I wish this type of interaction, this type of engagement will keep alive for the future, along with other pakshas, the prima facie views, counterparts which are not very friendly to this tradition. So with these words, friends, let me go to talk a few words about this Darsanam. Darsanam is a word. See, there are two words in which we can say, what is philosophy? What is the word for philosophy in India? There has been a long debate. And some people say Tattva Vichara. Some people say Anmichiki. Kautilya has said Anmichiki. And, Darsanam is a well accepted word for philosophy. And what is Darsana? Darsana is to see. And if Anmichiki, Anu Iksha, Ikshanam is also see. So Aikshata. So Ikshanam is also seeing. So Anmichiki, which Kautilya says more than anything else, let us have Anmichiki. And Professor Motilal, B.K. Motilal, like those who know him, Krishna Motilal says, Anmichiki will be a better word than Darsanam for philosophy in India. Anyway, that is a different, but I always felt that this is the word for philosophy in our country, because we always, at the end point, the culmination is nothing but a darsana, a realization. The realization may be metaphysical, but it is rooted in epistemology, darsana. And that is why, what is darsana? We have a beautiful definition of darsana. Darsana is, see, these are the words which have tremendous affinity with the West. Tremendous, I must say, they have tremendous affinity with the West. I will come within a minute. So, see, the doubt plays an important role in the West as far as epistemology is concerned. Dr. Srikala will speak in a while. Doubting, that like Descartes, even before Descartes, I'll come to that within a minute or so. But what is Darsanam for us is Samsaya Rahita. It should not have any samsaya, doubtless knowledge is the darsana. Viparya rahita, error free, doubt free, and error free. And anumana anapeksham jnanam darsanam. And that which does not depend upon anumana, that is called as darsana. And so you see, darsana is not a pratyaksha jnana, it is aparoksha jnana. You see, realization which is not indirect. It is a instant realization that is what is darsana. Why I am telling this is because to tell you that how much we value epistemology in our tradition. The whole tradition comes with this darsana, which is to see, and this is how we see. And what darsana goes to do? Darsana gives us the knowledge. Now, what is knowledge? What is knowledge? See, here when we studied philosophy at Madras University, our teachers went on in the beginning in the philosophy classes, a lot of discussion about this darsana. What is darsana? What is prama? What is pramana? And while doing prama, such a lot of discussion came comparing East and West. The Buddhist and pragmatic theory of truth, Naik's correspondence theory of truth, Mimamsaka's coherence theory of truth, all in the West. They were taught in the beginning that see, the West did not see India eye to eye as far as philosophy is concerned. Hegel onwards, the tradition, how they have belittled us. But we don't have to get belittled. We have, because, suppose I say Kerala is not a state because I have not gone there. Will Kerala cease to be a state? No. It is just opposite for me. I love that state. Every year I used to go there when I used to be in Madras. But what I'm telling is, these are the West was absolutely unaware of the philosophical tradition. Now, with the efforts made by many, starting from Vivekananda, I would bring Professor Motilal Nibitwin Mahanti and Arindam Chakravarti, all these people from India like D.M.P. Madhavan, Suryanarayan Shastri. They have brought about an awareness about Indic tradition, Indian tradition, Oriental tradition to the West. Anyway, I am just going, what is the basis of this darsana is prama. Jnanam. Jnanam means prama is a knowledge. And let me tell you, like in all the schools of Indian philosophy, you can find a counterpart in the early West, like the Greek as well as the modern and the contemporary philosophical schools. A lot of research needs to be done, and not many people have done also. Some people have done piecemeal work, but a total, like it is still not done a comparative study of the Indian and Western epistemological standpoints. Anyway, so with regard to knowledge, this prama, the views of Indian and Western philosophers differ very radically. Inspired by Plato, the first great systematic philosopher in the West, knowledge came to be conceived as information, which is impossible to be incorrect. And the paradigmatic knowledge was mathematics. That is, mathematical knowledge can never go wrong. They believed that if something was knowledge, it can never be wrong, it could never be wrong. And if something was wrong, it could not be knowledge. Therefore, we cannot say wrong knowledge, that usage is wrong. Unable to achieve such absolute certain knowledge, Western philosophers are frequently lapsed into skepticism. Professor, what is his name? I forgot. Chandra from Hyderabad University. He talks about why West is so much going with the skepticism, because vision is broad because of their climatic condition, all that he talks about. Anyway, so belief in the impossibility of attaining any kind of religion. They say it is impossible to attain any kind of reliable knowledge. But we are not in this type, not with this type of thinking. In India, we believed that our knowledge could indeed be sometimes right and sometimes wrong. See, they said that, they like absolute certain knowledge and right and wrong knowledge. These are the two paradigms with these Eastern and Western philosophical schools who are as epistemologists concerned. So since the Indian philosophers believed that our knowledge could indeed be sometimes right and sometimes wrong, they were satisfied if they arrived at valid knowledge is also not right usage. In English, knowledge is always valid. It is prama. And the ultimate test of whether any knowledge was correct lay in whether it could lead one to liberation. Savidya tadgyanam yat vimuktaye. This completely practical approach, see the theory to practice, how quickly we are. It is not just a theory, it involves practice. Protected Indian philosophers from lapsing into paralyzing skepticism, which always systematically troubled West. Okay, while Western philosophers totally dismissed all knowledge that was wrong, Indian philosophers made serious inquiry, attempt to understand the conditions that led one to wrong knowledge, so that we get the right knowledge. So this was because wrong knowledge was something that has to be avoided at all costs, since it caused bondage and prevented one from attaining moksha. Moksha comes from right knowledge. In almost all the schools, this is the standpoint, including Buddha. So it is also a fact that when one clearly recognizes here, he can easily grasp the truth. If one does not know what error is, it is possible for him to mistake some error for truth and thus remain continuously ignorant and bound with no chance of liberation. Please, I am telling it again, just listen carefully, those who are listening to this, seriously following. If one does not know what error is, it is possible for him to mistake some error for truth and thus remain continuously ignorant and bound with no chance of liberation. This is the reason. I'll come to time, is not much, 20 minutes, but I would like to say that anadhigata abadhitartha vishayakam jnanam prama, anadhigata and abadhita pratyaya has implication for the past. So because it is ta pratyaya, therefore I say I have written one article, Srikala, on this. Anadhigata abadhitartha vishayakam jnanam prama, would face some problem when we go to see that the logical possibility, tenability of this definition. Therefore, what I have done, not much time, I have told anadhigatatvam is not necessary because smriti, in order to avoid smriti, they have done anadhigatatvam. Abadhita is the criteria for prama. I say abadhitatvam prama will be sufficient. That is what one of my talks in International Vedanta Conference I wrote, that abadhitatvam prama will be enough. Why we go for anadhigata avadhitartha vishayakam jnanam prama? I don't have much time, that I give, I don't know whether Srikalan might not have seen this article, but this is one of my claims. I may be wrong also, stand to correction. So since correct knowledge is the key to achieving liberation, there is a great deal of emphasis in exploring all kinds of issues concerning both right and wrong knowledge in Indian epistemology. Wrong knowledge may occur without any kind of effort on a person's part, but no apparent reason we the example is we see a rupa snake. We don't have to try to see a rupa snake. Correct knowledge also may occur equally by chance, but when it occurs, we may not recognize it as correct knowledge, and therefore we may not benefit by it at all. Therefore, correct knowledge must be consciously aimed at. That is why we are darshan, and achieved in order to ensure that we get liberated. See how much practical orientation our schools have given as far as epistemology is concerned, and how much of affinity it has with the West. I don't want to take much of your time excepting saying that this is not, I'm talking from Advaitic background, all so far I have told, but this is the, if you go essentially with some like difference in the tenets approaches, you will find this as the paradigm for truth, which Shankara, I must say, one of the what's it, non-dual heroes of the world, as far as re-establishing, like giving back the human, like the humanity to the man, the essential rationality to the human beings who has done. He has done so far. I know about that, but this is all around. You can see in Brahmanavartika Bhashya also you come across this type of thing, like Abhisambadi Jnana. You come like in Deepika Tarkasangra also you come across such a type of things. Tadvati Tatprakaragam Jnanam or Anubhavaha Prama Yathartha, you can say. This has been modified in the course of time. They say Tadvanishta Viseshyata Nirupita Tarnishta Prakarata Salitvam Jnanam Prama. So a lot of discussion has gone into building up such brilliant epistemological pyramid in this tradition. I don't want to say much. I only want to conclude saying what the initial verses, she wrote, the girl who sang the invocative verses told, Tvadiyabhihi bhagbhi tava janani vacham stutiriyam. It is an epistemological sentence. I think all the epistemologies merge here. Go there. Like, oh Janani, I am making a stuti to you. Shankara talks to Amba. He says, Tvadiyabhihi bhagbhi tava janani. Saundarya Lahari last sloka. So, tava janani vacham stutiriyam. Yam stutihi, this is the stuti, they are the words, are not mine, mother tongue. So he says that it is, what is the understanding? The mother is nothing but understanding one's own self. It is the stuti to the mother is nothing but understanding one's own self. That is what Sankara says, and that is the greatest tradition, Srikala, I wanted to tell you, which has no parallel in the world. Philosophical schools is this school where the Vedas, the most authoritative epistemological tool used to understand one's own self, is spoken of as not Vedas. We can drop Vedas, still understand Ramakrishna as not a great Vedic scholar, nor Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, nor there are many who never spoke, but the great, even Govinda Bhagavad Pada, the great teacher of Sankara, was not talking through silence. See, that silence was so eloquent silence that it transmits Atma Jnanam to others. So I am happy, Professor Murali Madhavan, you gave me this opportunity to be with you after a long time, staying, in the southern coast. You are hearing from the eastern coast, like Prachi Mahodadhi. So I am here. So thank you very much. I would now invite Srikala to speak, give a lecture, and we shall have discussion after that. Thank you. Thank you again to all of you for being present to listen to what I spoke.
Thank you, Mishraji, for your short but meaningful presidential address. Now I invite Srikala, Professor Srikala, for her speech, for delivering the lecture.
Thank you. कल्याण गुणगात्राय कामित भलदायिने श्रीमद् वेंकटनाथाय श्रीनिवासाय ते नमः. Good afternoon to everyone. Professor Mishraji, Professor Murli Madhavan, the organizer Pradeep ji, the coordinator Ajitan, Professor Shashi Rekha. I learned there are several scholars here. I haven't seen everyone, so forgive me if I have missed out any senior professor here, and my young friends, researchers and colleagues. So we began with a wonderful presidential address. Professor Mishraji was in great spirits, and I heard him very good. What a beautiful rendition on epistemology, of particularly that of Advaita Vedanta. Yeah, I'm indeed grateful to you, Professor Mishra, for setting the stage so beautiful. But I do not know whether I'm good enough a dancer to stage on, perform my performance on the stage. Anyway, let us see. So friends, as announced by Dr. Ajitan, today we are going to see Indian epistemology as it sits in conversation with its Occidental counterpart. And we're also going to see the problems and prospects of it. Friends, as we start this conversation, apparently we seem to stand on two different platforms. As academic philosophers, one where I belong to, and Sanskrit scholars, where the rest of you may belong to. The colonial aftermath has made a conversation between these two clans almost impossible. Academia in philosophy. Why is it? Because academia in philosophy feel inferior in the company of the Sanskrit scholars, since we have been tainted with modernity. Paradoxically, though, the same reason, that is being, the modernity itself has become a factor to cause insecurity in Sanskrit scholars. They feel that they have not been sufficiently exposed to the modern literature and philosophies. It is pretty paradoxical indeed. So to my mind, it is long overdue for academic philosophers to shake off this colonial cultural subjugation. It's long overdue. The slavery of the spirit, and breathe the fresh air of Swaraj, as K.C. Bhattacharya says, the Swaraj in Ideas, the famous article. And the Sanskrit scholars, my appeal is that they in their turn should understand what is happening around to get over this insecurity. Friends, everything in the world got changed ever since Napoleon's campaign in Egypt and the British conquest of India. Unfortunately, for several years, our academia mistook this cultural conquest as a clash between two civilizations. It is one thing to have a conquest and another to have a clash. A clash can be resolved by dialogue, but not a conquest, because as Habermas says, one does not have a dialogue with your master. There is a movie called Elipatayam by Adur, where the typically how a subjugated person would behave in front of the master has been depicted. So one cannot possibly have a dialogue with your master. Edward Said, the famous, the Oriental, wherein he speaks on how the West converted the Orient to the other, stereotyping their thought as monolithic caricatures. I don't want to extend this colonial aftermath and the trouble that has been brewed. I'm just, giving you a necessary prelude to get onto my stage. Our Sanskrit scholarship, as I see it, got frightened with this cultural subjugation, and they stopped interpreting the tradition. I'm not saying that there were no interpretations. We have had Anandakrishna Shastri in the 20th century. Yeah, there were others, of course. But in some way, the interpretative traditions had a cry of hold. And they started interpreting the tradition, got confined to the study of the existing literature, not creating anything afresh. And this has done huge damage to our philosophies, reducing our living realities of our civilization to a stagnant pool of thoughts. And decolonizing our language habitat was one of the urgent needs to undo what is called the colonial aftermath. Friends, you should know that language is not a neutral vessel for conveying ideas, as the empiricist philosophers would say. No, language is something loaded. To use a language is to interpret the world in a particular way. And I see that by dethroning Sanskrit, branding it as the language of the elite, the independent India has done a committed a big, huge blunder, something which we are yet to undo. With this prelude, let me get to the business. An attempt to assess the epistemic foundations of Indian philosophical streams, I presume, should pick up from the recent upheaval epistemology has had in the West, which it has received at the global level in the recent past, and its resonances felt in India. Since modernity, those who have had Professor Mishra was indicating that, since modernity, epistemology in the West became the first science, since Descartes through Locke, Berkeley, Hume, the empiricist tradition, the rationalist tradition, and then the 20th century positivists, and the whole lot of them have placed epistemology as a first science, and following their footsteps, in India too, epistemology received considerable attention during the colonial and the post-colonial period. And most of the philosophical works written during this time, he was mentioning a few names, and I add to that list Shivajivan Bhattacharya, several of them, mostly the Bengali intellectuals. He has referred to Matilal Mohanty and all of them, who most of them have significantly contributed to this. And how they contributed, most of the philosophical works written during this period, if you look at the ICPR publication, it will be very, very evident. Those works written during this period try to enlarge the epistemic insights of classical Indian philosophy. Epistemology was at the focus, borrowing tools from Western epistemological studies. So what these philosophers have done is, borrowing the tools from the West, they try to analyze Indian epistemology. So this epistemological focus or orientation also was reflected in the academic programs. And interestingly, it's very nice to see that the whole of the universities across the country set to revise the master's syllabuses, and the syllabuses were revised in a way first specifying the epistemic positions of each school before getting to spell out the ontology. Evidently, this lifted the profile of Indian philosophy significantly, because in India, philosophy no more remained a mere storytelling as it was a little before, not during the classical times. It no more remained a storytelling or a historical narration. The method was changed from descriptive and narrative to analytic and argumentative. While this shift was a welcome one, I see a danger, or I have been experiencing this danger ever since for past 20 or 25 years during my career as I was teaching Indian philosophy. It caused a serious damage to philosophizing in India. And what is it? It went on to cast a neat divide between the two subdivisions of philosophy, namely epistemology and ontology. A few minutes before, you have seen how Professor Mishra has synchronized these two subdisciplines of philosophy. Because here in India, we really never had walls raised between these two disciplines, something which is quite alien to the Indian tradition. So efforts to abstract the epistemic issues from its ontological footings and tailor them in a way best appealing to the Western mind. See, the modern Indian philosophers thought that unless we delink the two, the West will not appreciate. And if the West will not appreciate, well, we will fall low in our own eyes And in order to raise our status, this is all the colonial aftermath. What do you think is the real subjugation? It is not the political subjugation. It is the cultural subjugation and the aftermath that we experience, which is most dangerous and most harmful. So what they did was that they tried to, whatever that Professor Matilal has done, or Professor Mahant has done, all these were part and parcel of this kind of exercise. They try to delineate the epistemological factors that were linked with the ontology, so that the West would appreciate it best, and has diminished, and this has diminished the possibility for a comprehensive understanding of each individual school as one single story. It appears, therefore, that we are offered two disjunctive possibilities. It appears that we have, as modern philosophers, we have only a disjunctive possibility. You know what a disjunction is? Either or. Either borrow the Western mode and restructure Indian philosophy in such a way that the global community can participate in the discussion, so that you can engage dialogue with the West, or stick on to the traditional mode and ignore the dialogical possibilities with the West. So this seems to be a disjunctive possibility. I refuse to take it as disjunctive. My attempt would be to slip through these two horns and take a middle position. The priority, as for me, the priority will be to follow the native way of philosophizing, to apprehend the prime epistemic issues as placed in their original cultural lab. What I mean is the ontological lab, rather than from an objective nowhere. But at the same time, I wish to keep the door for dialogue open on pressing issues in epistemology. And friends, it would be a dialogue with dignity. I remember when, I don't know whether Professor Mishra was there in last World Conference in China. Professor William Swede has organized a roundtable, and it was called Dialogue with Dignity. I was also participant in it. So I've placed some of these ideas. I mean, it is very brief. So this dialogue with dignity seems inevitable. For basically, Indian philosophy has flourished through dialogue, as Professor Murali Madhavan very often says, Vade Vade Jayate Tattva Bodha. But as well as dialogues being undertaken within the Indian tradition, we know the norms, or rather, there are great manuals being written on Vadanyaya, starting from Gautama's Nyaya Sutra. So we are all very clear how to run the show with regard to argumentation within India. But a different set of norms need to be formulated to engage dialogue with an alien tradition, be it that of the European or with any other tradition for that matter. So a straight-jacketed, fit-for-all epistemology might not cater to the culturally, linguistically, and socially situated epistemology. And this is an awareness that of late the globe has come with. Professor Anand Vaidya has made, few days before he has made a presentation for us, has made efforts to fix norms for cross-cultural studies in epistemology. He raises the inclusion problem in epistemology. He poses objection before the West, stating that there is an inclusion problem in epistemology, which demands the inclusion of non-Western attempts to resolve Western philosophical problems. While it is a matter of common consensus that a robust epistemological account should be interested in such attempts that come forth from alien cultures. If the European culture is proposing theories on epistemology, they should be interested in what the alien cultures presume with regard to the given task. So it's the case with India. So a robust epistemological account should be naturally open for dialogue with alien cultures. We may take note of the fact that the enthusiasm shown by the non-Western philosophers has not been reciprocated. Think, how often do we see Western philosophers use techniques from Western philosophy to solve a problem in non-Western philosophy? I barely see one, to tell you the fact. Probably Professor Mishra could tell us if he has ever seen one. So problems such as these that have strings extended to ethnical, political, and cultural realms will have to be addressed to set the stage for a deeper interaction between Indian epistemology and its Western counterpart. So I am of the view that while one efforts to take an Indian epistemology to a global canvas, the cultural specificity and the uniqueness should not be compromised, and don't stretch it beyond limits to take it at par with the West. You don't have to be a die-hard person to take it to the Western platforms. So much so to the problems and prospects in engaging a dialogue with the West. I'll also speak about these difficulties on and off as I proceed further. Now, when we attend on Indian epistemology, as Professor Mishra has said, in the story he has said, to which school are you referring to? Yes, so we should not speak in singular. There are as many epistemologies as there are schools, or as many epistemologies as there are ontologies. But to make the argument feasible, I shall confine myself to the Nyaya, Mimamsa, and the logical school of Buddhism with epistemology, and invite the Madhyamakas to represent Indian skepticism. I'll see whether I can address skepticism. If time permits, I'll do it. If I'm not tired, I'll do it. Yes. Is there an Indian way of doing philosophy? Let us start with that. Is there an Indian way of doing philosophy? Professor Mishra was eloquent on darshana. In fact, this nomenclature, doing philosophy itself, is something borrowed from the West. Professor R. Balasubramanian once has asked me, Srikala, what do you mean by doing philosophy? He was speaking in Nalanda University, Professor Mishra, and he pointed at me and he said, I don't understand what these people mean by doing philosophy. For instance, Srikala uses that. I have no clue what she means by that, I still remember. So in India, actually, as true as Professor Balasubramanian has said, we don't do philosophy, we live philosophy. Philosophy is not something extrinsic to us, as my master has said. It comes in and models everything significant in our lives, be it art, be it science, be it literature, be it culture, and be it religion. So often it was pointed out that, coming to epistemology as such, Indian philosophical schools stitch their epistemological outfits to fit their chosen ontological position. And this is I have grown up when I was in Madras University. I was referring to Radhakrishnan Institute of Advanced Study in Philosophy. Those days, the Department of Philosophy, Madras University is called. I've grown up hearing this charge put forth by our Occidental counterparts that here you don't have epistemology proper, it is all psychology, because epistemology is dealing with logic, then it becomes psychology. And all that they do is that it's a mixture of ontology and some concerns of epistemology. You don't have pure epistemology because it is dealing with logic. That was the claim. But well, friends, I would say that this is a misnomer. Pramanadhinaha prameya sthiti, as all of you know. Epistemology here seems to be the first science. I'll prove that. The truth is that, in fact, there is no compartmentalizing at all between epistemology and ontology. Both sciences are intertwined. That segregating one from the other is impossible. A truth of late realized by the West. I suppose they know it. Erna Sosa, with whom I have had a discussion recently, I was trying to speak about it. And he said, yeah, I do realize. As Bina Gupta long back, I think it is, what is that work? Chit Shakti or something, I don't remember. Where she beautifully quoting that famous Advaita statement, Brahmavid Brahmaiva Bhavati, she says, apparently, it means that Brahmavideva Brahma, Brahmo Bhavidam Shakyade. But then it can have an ontological reading as well. So here, Brahmavid Brahmaiva Bhavati means that one has to know Brahman in order to be Brahman. So you can have an alternate reading that only by being Brahman, you can know Brahman. So now, which precedes what? Does ontology precedes epistemology, or epistemology precedes ontology? Vinagupta beautifully shows that neither precedes the other. They are parallel. They go together. They are not two sciences. They, in fact, become one single science. So while we concede that both are parallel sciences, procedurally, when we speak about a school, supposing that I have to teach you Advaita Vedanta, well, I'll have to speak first epistemology. So procedurally, epistemology has a precedence over ontology, and therefore epistemology is the first science in Indian philosophical exegesis as well. So while addressing the principal questions in Indian epistemology, I would like to underscore the similarities that it bears with the European tradition or its European counterpart. Down the history of epistemology, I'm speaking the global scenario. Epistemology, it has been said, has been concerned with three major issues. What are the three issues? What is knowledge? Or how do you define knowledge? The second is, what are the means of acquiring it? Or how do you get knowledge? And the third, is knowledge possible? Or how do you defend knowledge? Now, both Indian and Western traditions have evolved out their epistemologies based on these three basic issues. Now, let us begin by addressing the first issue. What is knowledge? Or better, how can we define knowledge? To put it logically, what are the necessary and sufficient conditions? In terms of predicate logic, you speak about the necessary and sufficient conditions, which has been represented by IFF, if and only if. So if you put IFF, then what follows is a set of necessary and sufficient conditions. I presume that you know the significance of stating necessary and sufficient conditions. We also have in Indian philosophy where you give definitions. Yes, so this, what is called the analysis of knowledge, has a standard definition in the West, and it is called the DTB definition, where you have truth, belief, and justification being considered as the three conditions which are necessary and sufficient to define knowledge. So to the locution, yes knows that P, here S is the cognitive agent and P is the preposition or the object. Remember, in the West, it is always a preposition and never an object, which never a concrete material object, which is the object of knowledge. So this is yet another problem in juxtaposing these two traditions. So yes knows that P, if and only if the preposition P is true. Second, the agent yes believes in the preposition. And then third, the agent yes has some kind of a justification in believing that P. Heated debate was on, Professor Mishraji also remember, during 80s. It started in early 80s, but then I got attended to it. I came to Madras University in 89, I presume. Yeah, 89 for MPhil. At that time, I was initiated to this. Karl Potter, Matilal, Shivjivan Bhattacharya, Mahanta, Sandhyadi. I remember some of these scholars where, and the pages of JSCPR were filled with articles on this. And in what follows, I shall try to depict Indian standard analysis borrowing this JTB definition of knowledge, or what is called the JTB structure. Let's take up the first problem, namely the problem of truth. Professor Mishra indicated. We are familiar with two terms, as he has also mentioned, yana, and often they are wrongly used as if they are synonymous, which is wrong. They have the genus species relation. While jnana refers to an attempted cognition, prama is episteme proper, impregnated with truth as its definite condition. So only that which has truth as one of its conditions can be or can come to the status of knowledge. So the term jnana stands for all kinds of cognition, irrespective of its truth condition. And it is simply an act of awareness. Any act of awareness which has intentionality. And what is intentionality? Intentionality is when your consciousness is directed towards an object. So if yourself is taking an interest in a particular object and then trying to have the cognition, well, then this process is called jnana, and that is all. So this is what is called jnana. This jnana can be divided into two, as Mishraji has said, Smriti and Anubhava. And Smriti, why recollection and Smriti is not being considered as knowledge, he has already been mentioned that novelty is a necessary condition for knowledge, and since Smriti is an already adhigata jnana, then we do not give the credit of knowledge to it because it cannot produce novelty to the person. See, do you understand how Indian epistemologist is trying to look at the problem, the conscious agency and the phenomenal world and its confrontation. And whatever be the ontological status of the phenomenal world, Madhyamakas and Advaitins would say that they are constructs. Well, Nayayikas and Mimamsakas say there is a real world. So the Bauddhas would, Swatantra Vijnanavadins would say something different. Whatever be the ontological status of the world, well, there is the cognitive agent and there is an object and the confrontation. And what happens when this confrontation takes place? How the phenomenal experience has been raised? That is the primary concern of an Indian epistemologist. And if, since Smriti is no knowledge, they take up Anubhava, again divided into two, Yadhartha and Ayadhartha, and they go further with Yadhartha Anubhavaha, as he has said that Tadvati Tatprakarakam Jnanam Yadhartha Purovartini Rajate Idam Rajatam iti Pratitihi. If you see a shell and then you mistake it for silver, then that is no Brahma, that is Ayadhardham Jnana. Mistaking a rope for a snake is an Ayadhardham Jnana. So Brahma is used to designate only true cognition, and otherwise it will be a Midya Jnana. So the etymology, as you all know, your Sanskrit scholars, let me not try to give the etymological meaning to that. You know what Brahma means. So the measuring, the fine measuring of your objective experience is what is expected to happen when this cognitive exercise is being taken. So Professor Matilal here points out that it is a process set in motion by doubt, samshaya. Initially, the self should be interested in the object. You know that there are several things happening in front of us, but we are not interested. So the self should have intentionality first, and then should know whether it is Thanurva, Purushuva. You should have a doubt being initiated, and then you progressively, I go closer, and then I measure up, and then I fix this as something. And there is this Nischaya Jnana, as Professor Mishra has said, there is samshaya has been uprooted, and there is definite knowledge with regard to the particular object that's been confronted. So it is this truth-hitting character of the episode that turns the cognitive episode into a knowledge episode. Now, very quickly, though you might not be interested, but I feel that I should introduce this theme to you. Is Brahma prepositional? My Sanskrit scholars might not know what preposition is. Very quickly, I'll tell you what a preposition is. A preposition is, a logical counterpart for a sentence. You know that sentences cannot be the truth bearer. According to Western philosophy, sentences cannot be truth bearers because they change their material. They are subjective, and therefore they cannot be truth bearer. So they have drafted something called a preposition. These prepositions are mathematical entities, quite like, say, numbers. You will teach a child 4 by showing 2 apples and 2 oranges, but you know that all that you have in the table is oranges and apples. You don't have neither 2 nor 4. So because it's a logical construct that you are applying onto the concrete object. Quite like that, you have a logical representation of a sentence is called preposition. And this preposition, if you say truth is a logical problem, so in order to have a bearer of truth, you need a logical entity. And that is why Western thinkers have thought that they will have to raise something called preposition. But well, Indian philosophers haven't done it. I'll just argue out why. Now, as far as Nayayikas are concerned, apart from sentence and its reference, Nyaya doesn't refer to an mediating entity called preposition. Being thoroughgoing naturalist, you should understand, Sarukai, Sundar Sarukai, beautifully argues that we, Indian philosophers, basically scientists. Very true. Because, we have been interested with the phenomenal experience. And we don't multiply ontological entities like the West, creating prepositions and other entities, so on and so forth. We are thoroughgoing naturalists. As naturalists, Nyaya wouldn't find virtue in constituting non-existing entities called prepositions. Remember, in Indian semiotics too, we have all natural symbols. If you look at Indian semiotics, the science of signs, you have all natural signs. You don't have formal signs. That is why formal science has not been developed here. Just asking one of the formal scientists recently whether you consider it as it's a shortcoming in Indian logic. He said no. So Indian philosophers are thoroughgoing naturalists. Look at our sign. Dhuma is a natural sign. It is not a formal sign. It is a natural sign that we concretely see and experience. So nevertheless, Mahante, who was over enthusiastic in juxtaposing Indian epistemology to the West, Jayan Mahante, he argues that Savikalpaka Pratyaksha, if you want, you can be considered as prepositional in nature. Why? Because Savikalpaka Pratyaksha, that Nayayikas say that perception need not be put in language, but if you want, you can put it in language. Savikalpaka Pratyaksha is judgment, suggesting that it can be put in language. Now, corollary to this argument is the relation between perception and language. Is knowledge necessarily being placed in language? There are grammarians and the rest of them who argue strongly in favor of this. But then I'm interested in presenting the huge debate that ran for centuries between Nayayikas and Bauddhas on this. And Bauddhas have argued that perception should not be judgmental, or they say that perception should be non-judgmental to be freed from the possibility of error. You know that Bauddhas subscribe to what is called Kshanikavada. So the real is the Kshanika. So since by the time, you make a construction and come up with a linguistic representation of your perception, you are referring to something else, not the thing originally you have had experience. So they speak of Swalakshana Pratyaksha and Samanya Lakshana Pratyaksha. So in Samanya Lakshana Pratyaksha, you have the categories, the class conception, everything being applied. You know that you can make a linguistic representation only if the categories have been applied to it, the class, the relation, and all the other modes. So by the time you do all this, the immediate real entity would have passed off. So that is why Bauddha say that linguistic representation of perceptual experience is not possible. And there is a huge debate that ran for centuries between Bauddhas and Nayayikas on this. Now, when Bauddha say that it would be only non-judgmental perceptions would be freed from error, Gangesha very smartly, he asks, precluding the possibility of a cognition being erroneous, thereby would also eliminate even the possibility of its being true. See, it is a binary concept. If there is falsity, there is truth. Only if there is falsity, there can be truth as well. So you can't have a state where you have only true assertions. But Bauddha's ontological claim is something different. We don't have time to go into that. But nevertheless, Nayayika is a realist. They are logicians, and therefore they subscribe to what is called the binary logic. Well, so this is the beautiful debate that we have had. So now let us have a closer look at the truth condition as such. Mishraji has initiated this. There seems to be an unbroken line of speculation on what is pramanya or the definition of prama. Bhaksiyana, for instance, the Bhashyakara defines prama as yadhardham jnanam sa pramitiridi. And according to him, what makes knowledge true is its non-contradiction, or ardhavya bhijarati, can also be compared to classical correspondence. You have the classical correspondence, where you have the three entities. In the West, you have classical correspondence subscribed since the time of Aristotle, where you have the truth bearer, truth donor, and the relation of correspondence. The truth bearer is the agent. Here it is the preposition. Truth donor is the entity. When I say that the grass is green, the green grass is the truth donor. And my preposition that the grass is the green, that grass is green is the truth bearer. And the relation of correspondence, this one-to-one relation between the grass being green in the world and my proclamation that grass is green, is what provides the so-called correspondence truth. And I have said that there was an evolution of truth we can envisage in Nyaya textual tradition. Later, Udayana has refined the prama as tadvaditat prakaragatva jnanam yadhartham tadvadi. That being the case, you know that it is the case. To know a thing truly is to know it as being characterized by what it is. That being the case, you know it as such. The truth or falsity of knowledge depends respectively on its conformity or non-conformity of object. And this reminds you of Wittgenstein's picture theory of meaning, wherein he says that meaning is nothing but pictorial representation of the reality. And at the close, of course, Mishraji has gone further, but I'll just stop with Gangesha. Rejecting the earlier definitions provides a minimal definition of correspondence, where he says, Yatra yadasti tatra tasya anubhava. Where there is something, experiencing that, yes, what is called as true experience. This kind of minimal correspondence. Why he goes minimal? Because he rejects the earlier picture theory of truth for reasons quite similar to those philosophers who have criticized the classical correspondence. Because he says very beautifully, Jnane ghatatvadina yadha shabdardhe sadrishya bhavat. What does this mean by yadha? Yadha, you cannot have a real representation of this yadha, and therefore he says, let us go minimal in defining truth. So this kind of minimal correspondence, which Horwich and all of them have had, has been propounded as early as Gangesha, and it reminds us that the intuition of correspondence is nevertheless valuable. As the philosophers, the contemporary analysts, Nayayikas also have maintained that having addressed all these problems with correspondence, nevertheless, correspondence, the intuition of correspondence is very, very significant. And therefore, he goes for the minimal theory. In brief, it is interesting to see how philosophers belonging to these two traditions have located similar problems with correspondence, that's a classical variety of correspondence, and come up with newer and newer definitions as the traditions pass by, all through preserving the intuition of correspondence intact. Now, the Indian scenario, when you come to belief, the second condition has had no belief as one of its conditions in knowledge analysis. Why? Because Jnana Brahma is an episode, it is a cognitive event that is happening. As I've told you earlier, when the conscious agency confronting the phenomenal world, it happens. It's a happening, it is an event that takes place. While belief is a mental state or a mental disposition in the West. Once again, the naturalistic undertone restricts the possibility of a normative epistemology. Here, we do not have a normative epistemology. Here, we don't go by norm. As Sarukai has rightly said, we are scientists, we don't go by the norm. So knowledge is not a procedural evolution of a belief that blooms up as knowledge passes through different stages, but an actual interaction of a cognitive agent with the phenomenal world. Nevertheless, we may say that knowledge involves beliefs to the extent that, as Mishraji has said, that it is bereft of doubt, or it is otherwise called as Nishchaya Jnanam Saprama. So when we come to the justification condition, the most problematic condition that we have in the West, we also have its counterpart in India. Pramanya requirement has, very interestingly, in Indian knowledge analysis, we don't speak of truth and justification as two different conditions. They are finely rolled into one, since the Anat Pratyaya permits the term to carry two meanings. With Bhave Anat, it is Pramatva, and with Karane Anat, you have the Bhave Anat and the Karane Anat. When you apply the Bhave Anat, it is Pramatva. And with Karane Anat, you have the Prama Karana. So when you adopt the Karane Anat, you can look for the conditions that procured evidences, or the conditions that procure the truth of the said proposition. So the former refers to simply the truth element in a knowledge proposition, and the latter means the property of being instrumental in bringing about truth or knowledge. So I will speak a little on the Karane Anat. So the latter insists that knowledge is born of non-deviant causal factors. Avyabhichari karana janyam jnanam prama. Adushta karana janyam jnanam prama. He was talking about abadhitatva. So badhita state is a deviant state as far as knowledge is concerned. You know, we have invested the defeasibility analysis and so on and so forth. You can, for the young researchers, all this should be topics of interest. In SS perceptual knowledge that this is a chair, the most efficient causal factor is the visual sensation that I see a chair. And the same visual faculty could be regarded as the evidence for my perceptual experience or perceptual knowledge that this is a chair. Now, the moral of the story seems to be that in India, epistemologists is being ever vigilant in bridging the gulf between truth and justification. See, what has happened in the West is truth is out in the world. Justification is with the agent. Now, the agent is trying to collect the best of the evidences so that he can reach at the truth. And as Gettier problem has shown, very often we may fail. But in India, that wouldn't happen because the very factors that made the proposition true also become the causes for you to believe it. So I have said that they being vigilant in bridging the gulf between truth and justification conceived guna as truth ensuring, which effectively bridge the gap between the truth and the evidence. As Alvin Goldman also speaks about reliabilism, and his reliabilism is very, very close to our Pramanya theory, and those who are interested can make a comparative study as well. So now how does Pramanya be achieved? As some of you at least know that it has been discussed at 2 stages, knowing the cognitive awareness and knowing the knowledge episode. How is an awareness being known? There are again 2 positions. There are 2 rival positions. For instance, you have the Swaprakashavada, wherein it's been argued that when an awareness arises, it apprehends not only the thing, but also the awareness itself. Along with the object, you also have the awareness of the awareness. By the same token, you have varieties of it in the Indian context. You have the Swaprakashavada, you have Swasamvedinavada, and you also have Triputi Pratikshada Vada. A school of Mimamsakas, I think Shalikanatha, they say that Triputi, the 3 have been comprehended at one stroke. The self, the object, and the knowledge at one stroke. So the rival position, where the Nayayikas belong to the rival position, they say that when an awareness arises, it apprehends only the thing, and we need another event to apprehend, yet another event to apprehend it, because knowledge is always directed towards the object. That is what Nayayikas would say. So in order to torch itself, we need yet another process, and this is called as Anu Vyavasaya Paschat. So there is a Vyavasaya which has to subsequently come up, and there are also, Bhattas would call it Jnatata. And there is also Murari Mishra school, which hold a variant of Anu Vyavasaya. Now, when we come to the Pramanya, how is it that we know that truth has been clubbed with our awareness? And how do we know that it has been clubbed? So there are 2 different problems. How truth has been generated and how truth has been known. So now with regard to the Pramanya Utpatti, there are rival positions. Pramanya Utpatti Hiswataha, where the causal complex, where they hold that the causal complex that gave rise to the cognition itself provides the truth of it. And you have the Parataha argument, where they say that the causal complex that gave rise to the cognitive awareness need to be supplemented to generate truth in it. The Yagas belong to the latter category. With regard to Nyapti, how do you know that? Very interesting. Knowing that one knows. And here lies the clue for untying the Gettier problem as well. So Nyapti, they say, again Mimamsakas would hold the Swata theory. Whatever causes the knowledge of the awareness causes by the same token the knowledge of its knowledge good. While the Parataha, Pramanya Nyapti, the Nayayikas, the Bauddhas also joined this group. So they argue that the causal complex that give rise to the knowledge of the awareness need to be supplemented by some additional conditions. Nayayikas would say it is pravarti samardhya, it is samvadi pravarti samardhya, they are identical in fact. Pravarti samardhya or samvadi, pravarti dharmakarti is pravarti samardhya, or nyaya samvadi pravarti. Now comes the Gettier challenge and how Gettier challenge has been resolved by both East as well as the West. What is Gettier problem? Very quickly, I'll tell you what it is. In 1963, Edmund L. Gettier Jr. in 1.5-page article has presented 2 counterexamples wherein he says, despite an agent having fulfilled these 3 conditions, namely truth, belief, and justification, can stand ignorant or can stand not being credited with knowledge. And he provides 2 counterexamples wherein, as Professor Mishra has said, the luck element, he says how significant it is that even if the luck favors you, you cannot claim knowledge. Very, very significant. And so Gettier has shown that if the luck plays a significant role, technically you have the evidences, but then there is a disconnection between truth and justification, and therefore you end up being justified, but nevertheless can't claim knowledge. So now this is Gettier problem, and this has rocked Western epistemology, and there were several reformulations, and everybody was busy arguing what could be the 4th condition that could be added to immunize GTB analysis from Gettier type counterexamples. So its resonance were felt in India also during 80s and early 90s. I have done it in my thesis as well. Leading scholars in Indian philosophy at that time competed with one another in filling the pages of JICPR with wondering whether Indian standard analysis has been countered by Gettier type attacks. And if not, is it immune to Gettier type counterexample? Or if it is not immune, what could be the 4th condition, quite like the proposals that we see in the best, so and so forth. A close look at the 2 presuppositions involved in Gettier problem would reveal 2 things. First, an internalist theory of justification ought to fail. That is why in the West has subscribed to an internalist theory of justification. What is an internalist theory of justification? Wherein the agent is supposed to have the access to the justificatory evidence. But fortunately in India, we subscribe to an externalist theory of justification. Post-Gettier scenario, some of the Western scholars also have started subscribing to the externalist theory of justification, wherein you stand justified, but then you don't have to have the access of justification. Yes. And the second is that justification should be footed on natural evidences and not technical ones. And both these are favorable to Indian knowledge analysis. So in the next textual tradition of Nyaya, examples abound on cognitive episodes where you have the pramana abhasa. Immediately what comes to your mind is that steam smoke example, where Sree, citing such instances, he says that they are all asamardha visheshana, and therefore they turn out to be non-differentiator. And Prashastabhada, very interestingly, you know that he was a Vaisheshika being subdued by the Nayayikas. He locates an inferential fallacy in this steam smoke example. You know, steam smoke, mistaking steam to be smoke. You infer fire there, but nevertheless there is fire, but you can't claim knowledge. This is what you have in Indian textual tradition as a typical case of Brahmana Bhasa. So Prashastabhada locates an inferential fallacy here, and he coins a new type of a fallacy called Tadbhava Siddha Hetu Abhasa. But that has not been accepted by the standard Nayayikas, and you know what has happened to the legends of history. So resolving this crisis amicably, now Gangesha comes up with a wonderful solution. Gangesha says that in all such cases, we can credit primary knowledge to the agent, but restrict the secondary level of knowledge. He knows, but he doesn't know that he knows. So this secondary level of knowledge, in fact, he says, is not essential in mundane things. You don't have to insist on it. you need justification, where he says in philosophical disputes, you will have to cater the justificatory conditions because they are serious affairs. And in mundane things, if things are going smooth, then you don't have to worry. You don't have to stay back and see whether I am properly justified, whether there is a connection between truth and justification in my claim, and so on and so forth. That is neither feasible nor is it practical. And therefore, he says, go ahead, give them permission to have a weak sense of knowledge. What is a weak sense of knowledge? Take out the justification condition and be happy with true belief. And this is exactly what has been told by contemporary scholars like Goldman. I wanted to bring Goldman to Sankaracharya University of Sanskrit some when I was the head of the department way back in 2015, I think, but then somehow did not work. So Goldman says that all that you need for mundane exercises is just true belief, and you don't have to bother about justification. So there were fruitful debates that has been undertaken by the Western and the East Asians alike consider such instances as counterexamples. And scholars like Timothy Williamson, he says that, this non-factorizable mental state, knowledge as a non-factorizable mental state, where you decompose knowledge as truth, belief, justification, plus an anti-lack condition that doesn't work in East Asian traditions. And also Jonathan Stahls, in a famous paper, Gettier and Facticity in Indo-Tibetan Epistemology, he says he finds it impossible to fit Indian knowledge analysis in the Western TTB structure due to the episodic character of knowledge here, and also the unique feature of pramana requirement here. Also, J.L. Shah says that addressing the Gettier problem, he says that Udayana would have resolved the problem in a different fashion. I am not going to address the second issue, namely how knowledge has been acquired, the pramana vichara. I'm not, because all of you know that pramanas, what are the methods of knowing, is over-attended by everyone. And so we are not going to attend, the standard pramanas. We have the standard 4 by Nayayikas, 6 ordinarily accepted by Indian schools. It goes up to 8, even to 12. You can have as many pramanas as you want. But I'm reminded of a sloka often quoted by Professor S.R. Sadhanam dushanam chaiva sabhasam parasam vide pratyaksham anumanam cha sabhasam atma samvide. So there is a distinct set of tools. You have two toolkits. One is philosophical tools and the other is epistemic tools. The philosophical tools are sadhana and dushana, kind of argumentation. So argumentation is a philosophical tool, and pratyaksha anumana are all philosophical or epistemic tools. So the philosophical methods, when you talk about the philosophical methods, what comes, I'll just give one instance of a philosophical method, namely argumentation. You know what argumentation is in Nyaya Shastra, Vada, Jalpabatan, and all that. And all that I want to impress you is the meticulous effort made again and again down the tradition to, chisel out this Vada, or what you call the Vada Nyaya, by since Bauddhas, after Nyaya Shastra, soon Bauddhas followed the suit, and early attempts along these lines can be seen in Asangas, Mahayana Sangraha, which is followed by a full-fledged work on the topic by great Vasubandhu, which is called Vadavidhi, and later on by Dharmakirti, a very meticulous work called Vada Nyaya. And you know that even Jainas, all of them have written Vada Nyaya, and recently I've spoken on Nyaya Parishuddhi of Vedanta Deshika, which is again, why is it that each one of them write their own Vada Nyaya? Because they want to stipulate the norms that best fit their school, and therefore they kind redefine the terms and conditions for Vada. Wow, what a beautiful tradition. Now I'll conclude, I suppose, by addressing, I'll just make 2 or 3 sentences with skepticism and Indian science and wind up, because it's a huge text that I have written, but then I feel a bit tired, and I'm sure if I'm tired, you must be all the more tired. So is knowledge possible at all? And what is the skeptic challenges that has been addressed here? We, skeptics have been often considered as the intruders into the temple of truth. No, never in the Indian tradition. We always believed that both of us are on the same business. What is the business? To understand knowledge. And the only problem with skeptics is that they blow it out of proportion. But Indian skeptics like Nagarjuna would say that no, we are not blowing it out of proportion, because all that we do is that we try to accept things which are not being proven, and that is not a crime. For instance, you have Nagarjuna, Jayarashi, Sriharsha. The tradition is great. In Vigraha Vyavartani, you have the beautiful debate between Nayayikas and Madhyamakas, where Nagarjuna says that if Pramana is the supporter of Prameya, then what supports Pramana? And then Nayayikas would say that Pramanas are self-supported. And then Nagarjuna says, in that case, why don't Prameya also support by themselves? Then they say that no, Pramanas are, peculiar kind of things that they are capable, like, quite like in the foundationalism, the rock bottom things, they support themselves as well as support others. And then Nagarjuna doesn't accept this. And then the analogy they give is quite like light, which reveals the other objects as well as itself. Nagarjuna says the analogy misfires. Light never reveals itself. Light reveals objects when things are in the dark. But where there is light, how can there be darkness? So light can never reveal itself. So he says that your analogy misfires. And therefore, he says that all that he says is that everything lacks swabhava, but this must remain unsaid, because to assert it is to falsify it. Because quickly Nayayikas would say that whatever you have said is equally applicable to you. But Nagarjuna defends himself, saying that I'm not saying it, but what I'm trying is I am trying to state the state of affairs. This is the case. Even if I were not to be there to state it, things remain so. I will just try to wind up Nagarjuna by saying that in Karika, he speaks about the status of the Shunya. Beautiful it is. I was teaching Mula Madhyama Karika for my students for a while. So the non-dual absolute, which is Shunya, appears as diverse only on account of illusion. And he speaks about the Chatushkodi, where, he rewrites the 2 major laws, the Demogal law as well as the law of excluded middle, challenges these 2 laws, and then plunges into what is called logical pluralism. And that logical pluralism is something very, very contemporary. You heard of fuzzy logic and all that. I don't have time to speak about this, but I have written a paper on Madhyamakas, from logic through ontology to religion. So friends, what I want to impress you is that all these serious exercises Nagarjuna has done on logic and subsequently on ontology is not his prime concern. He is concerned about Dhamma, the redemption from this suffering. And therefore, he is addressing at the metaphysical monism. So for the Madhyamakas, this travel from logic through ontology to religion, to praxis, is what is most important. And I think you do not have yet another model in the whole of the world, barring that of Nagarjuna. I'll just speak 2 sentences on Indian sciences. Sundar Sarukai has beautifully spoken about in that small volume, spoken about how Parardha Anumana could be considered, particularly the Bauddha version. Dinaga and Dharmakirti, both of them hold that Parardhanumana is no inference. Only Swardhanumana can be considered as inference. Parardhanumana is kind of a scientific exercise. And the Vyapti Vichara, all of them where, he tries to chisel out Vyapti by giving finer and finer definitions. Some of you at least might know, I don't have time, comes very close to philosophy of science, where, what science is, inductive exercises. And that in induction, You do not have a priori truth, you have only a posteriori truth, where you have to deal with contingencies. You can have only probability truths. So how we can reach to finer probabilities is the concern. And that is exactly what Pararthanmana does. So we have, science is not the monopoly of Europeans. And who has said that? We here in India, Nalanda is a fine example, though contemporary Nalanda does nothing towards that. A fine example of how metaphysics, language, I don't have time, how Nagarjuna brings in the Prasajya Pratisheda and the two types of negation that he speaks about, where Professor Pahi also, I'm reminded of Professor Pahi, who says that in India alone we have grammar and logic be clubbed as one single science. I call upon the young scholars to take up all this. And not that, Indian philosophy doesn't need your support to stay, or you don't have to popularize it, but learn it for yourself so that you will be bright and you will benefit out of this. Sufficiently been attended by Western scholars as well. But after all, this is our tradition, our treasure chest. So I would like to conclude, friends, by saying that I strongly believe that urdhurdha aruhya yadarthadadvam dhihi pashyati shrantima vedayanti padam tadadyehi parikalpitana viveka supana parampara Abhinavagupta. So all that has been evolved out subsequently has been present in the seed form in the Vaidika tradition. And these fresh leases of thought have been coming out through it on and off. See, the Bhakti movement, start from Vishishtadvaita. Ramanuja was a great revolutionary. Why? Even Shankara himself was a great revolutionary. And on and off, this tradition has been renewing itself, recontextualizing itself, and that is going on. To quote the French intellectual Gustave Le Bon, who says in 19th century, to know how to preserve a tradition is a condition of existence for a people. Without the tradition, you don't have existence. But to know how to disengage from it is a condition of progress. You can't get stagnated into the tradition. You'll have to disengage also. So engaging and disengaging should parallelly be happening. Only then you can take the tradition and your culture, your philosophy ahead. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am, for your scholastic as well as illuminating lecture. It was great. It was indeed a great experience, ma'am.
Thank you.
So it's open for discussion. First, let us ask our president for his response. Mishra ji.
As a good, very ambitious project the Sree has taken up to bring about the inner implications, deeper implications of the epistemology that we have in the Indian tradition. Like I would say, like she has really done justice to the topic by bringing before us East and West and showing the parallels and starting with how it was in the West, how it is in the East, how Indian tradition has excelled in putting forth before the philosophical, fraternity, community in the world, the varieties. I don't think such varieties there anywhere in the world, but still unearthed, still to be worked out in the proper way. And I'm happy that Professor Murali Madhavan gave this forum for us to talk, listen to such a brilliant talk of Srikala. And I would wish that for the benefit of the younger generation, we should have smaller topics on which we should speak, and then it would be useful and easily understood. What happens, if you do have sufficient grounding on Indian philosophy would understand. But I would like to say that how this tradition of understanding has so deep. Like the word ma, which means mother, comes from like can be expanded to pramana. Ma means prama. Ma means pramana. Pramata. Pramana. Ma has two meanings. One is to measure, another is to know. And the two things, two aspects are being brought out. Like mother knows how much child will eat, and mother knows the measurement of food to be given to the child. See, this is how the tradition has grown up by seeing empirical evidence has been the root of philosophization. It has gone across the culture. Like I tell this for Professor Murali Madhavan, who is a great scholar. Even in Kalidasa, you go across such a chain. Like just because you don't see something, don't say it is like there is no source. You cannot simply dismiss things. Like one example, Professor Murali Madhavan is a great scholar in literature also, coming in the tradition of Professor Vasudevan father. I must take this opportunity, just one minute I will take Srikala to quote Kalidasa. Kalidasa, last time I quoted Kumarasmabha, this time Raghubans. In 13th canto, he says, Payodhare punyajanangananam nivista hemambujarev yasya brahmam saraha karanamapta vachaha buddheriva vyaktam udaharanti. He is telling when they are coming from Lanka, he is telling that this is Sarayu, the Sarayu river, and it has its genesis. It originated from the Manasarovar, Brahmam Sara. Like who? How do you know that it comes from Manasarovar? It is, Brahmam Saraha Karanam. What is the pramana for this? Aptavacha, Aptavacha. Can you give me another examples of such things which are not seen? Kalidasa says, Buddheriva Vyaktam Udaharanti. As from Abhyakta comes from Buddhi, Sankhya system. Similarly, just because something is not seen cannot be simply rejected, cannot be simply neglected, or cannot be taken as proofs. So that is how Kalidasa was there. Thank you, Srikala. It was very enlightening, very illuminating, and keep up this spirit, and let us have more deliberation. I also thank all the participants, like my great friend, Professor Jayendra Soni, and his wife, Dr. Ludgard Soni, who have joined this lecture, and all of you who have taken your time to be here. And thanks again to Professor now for yes, Ajit.
Yeah, I think he has some problem with
Hello.
net
Yes,
connection.
Ajit.
Hello,
Okay,
Dr.
okay,
Ajit.
yeah.
Ajit.
Audible? Am I audible?
Can
Hello?
you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you.
I am very happy that the lecture went on well as we expected. As usual, Professor Srikala, when she talks on philosophy, nothing remains untold. Normally, she speaks everything under the sun and connecting everything to the philosophy, her own subject, favorite subject. And I'm very happy. I'm remembering my past decades when I was with her in the university, and we were in neighboring rooms, heading two different departments, because it's not two different departments. It is actually it was what we call a sister department, and I have seen the dynamic, what we call the leadership she used to give to her department, and even to our own department, Sanskrit, Sahitya, and other departments. I am highly indebted to her for accepting our invitation to come on this Kandalur stage and platform and deliver such a scholarly talk. Anyway, this is what is expected. But what Professor Mishra has told, Mishra told that there should be some specific subject and it should be take a small subject and talk. That we are planning. We want to give a general lecture on each area and each division of the Indian intellectual sphere. And then we will come to, as we were discussing, there are, if you want to talk on Vyapti itself is a very big area. Yes. And like that, so many things are there in every subject, and we will come slowly. This is only just a beginning. And I am very happy that all the 10 lectures started from Arindam Chakravarti. A great Chakravarti has started this lecture, a great scholar of international repute. And each scholar we invited in a control platform, they proved beyond doubt that they are, they can, what we call, they can be the torch bearers of their subjects. And they shed light over the area and very authentically. And the scholars, the scholars attending this platform also. See, people like Professor Sree, Professor Soni, such great scholars, they are attending regularly. Professor Renu, so many people from different parts of India, even from outside India, they used to attend our lectures. And we are very happy that whatever the efforts we have taken are bearing fruits. So, Professor Srikala, I have just a simple doubt, not directly connected with your subject, but whatever you have explained, there is no room for any doubt. You have well explained everything. It's Naiyayikas, they accept 7 padarthas. Dravya Guna, Samanya Vishesha, like that. Their abhava they accept. I want to know, I am a little bit curious, but I could not get a proper answer from anybody. Even though I am a little bit, what we call, have some taste in philosophy. And whenever we teach Shankara, without philosophical approach, we cannot teach those subjects. Even our aesthetic works like Abhinav Gupta, Lochana, or Abhinav Bharati and such texts, you have what we call concluded your lecture with a verse from Abhinav Gupta. So he is not only an aesthetician, he is a very great philosopher also. So yes. So what is the counterpart? How Naiyayikas they prove? How, according to their epistemology, how they say that the abhava can be conceived? This is one very important question. And is there any counterpart? Is there any same area of discussing these matters in Western philosophy? And how they issue these problems regarding, see, in the philosophical field, in Indian philosophical field, Naiyas are vehemently criticized in accepting abhava padartha. So, what will be your approach and your answer for this regarding abhava padartha and the epistemological devices to realize abhava and or not to even to negate it? So I want to hear something from you, from your very horse mouth.
Probably I'm not the right person. There are Naiyayikas, but whatever little that I know, I will tell you. Bhava padartha, see, Vaisheshikas, when they make the categorization, Vaisheshikas make bhava padarthas and abhava padarthas, and then the first 6 fall under bhava padarthas and the other is abhava padarthas, and you're also aware of the criticism that they have confronted. Well, to the latter, it has been well accepted within the Indian scenario to go to the perfection of categorizing whatever that is perceived or perceivable. That is what is called categorization. See, you are trying to categorize anything that you would experience. That is what is called the metaphysical categorization, which Vaisheshikas have done, and Kanada Sutra, you have this. And Indian philosophers don't find fault with them. Of course, there are criticisms. But as it is the West is concerned, if you see many of the arguments, for instance, Professor William Sweeters once told me that, yeah, I find it very silly, Srikala, because he likes Buddhism, he likes Advaita. Very often it is the case that that is another reason, during the colonial time and post-colonial period, if you remember, including our Nehruji, everyone was, showing up Advaita Vedanta because it is the neat phase of Indian philosophy, they thought. The rest is all very silly arguments. I mean, that is what they thought. So many of them have thought the best if you tell them that there is something called abhava padartha and there is mutual absence, khate patasya bhava and all that, mutual absence, and like absence of a pot in this corner cannot be. That is how they defend the argument. They say that it cannot be known either through perception or inference or testimony, and therefore they say that you need a peculiar method for that, and Bhattas also have defended a peculiar method to understand non-existence. So this non-existence as a category, as a metaphysical category, is not feasible from a normal or commonsensical understanding, and therefore the West wouldn't accept. And I don't think in my immediate memory nothing comes similar to that, Professor Madhavan. But within the Indian scenario, well, you have this habit of, that is why I said that, cross-cultural epistemology is very hard, because you will have to get into the language and understand it. Very often we have, we have scholars from West communicating with others. And once there was a heated debate very recently, last month, between Professor Anand Vaidya and Professor S.R. Bhatt. And Professor Bhatt said that, no, Professor Anand, you haven't understood. And, he was trying to reason it out. And I understood both their problems. And I was obviously standing with Professor Bhatt because I understood what Professor Bhatt was saying is right. But, you can reason it out. It has a typical language, it has a typical culture. So abhava as a metaphysical category is very fine if you take it within the argumentative mode of Indians, but that is very peculiar. Probably that doesn't stand with the modern way of categorizing. And as this metaphysical categorization has stopped with Immanuel Kant. Now, nobody does this metaphysical categorization these days. It stopped with Immanuel Kant. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Is there any other question? Like, I would like the young to listen, to respond to my paper. If there are youngsters, scholars, probably it's all repetition. They might know all this.
Srikala madam, it's a wonderful,
How are you?
very wonderful, very clear. Both the sides you have done justice, because that West and East, though people like me who have not studied West, still we could understand. That means that is your clear explanation. And our Ramchandra sir has written a book regarding Western philosophy. So he thought, then he gave the title to the book. He first of all, he wanted to into Sanskrit he has written. Paschatya Darshana Itihasaha, he thought first. Immediately he changed his thought. He gave the title Paschatya Tattva Shastra Itihasaha. Because he said Paschatya philosophy, Western philosophy is not Darshana Shastra. It is only Tattva Shastra. Therefore, Tattva Shastra Itihasaha. So as you say, there only just he has distinguished between that and this. So, and Srikala is very clear, sir. Murali Madhavan sir, congrats to you, because you are picking up, except people like me, that is a different issue. Sometimes affection also matters, but this paper is very clear, as Mishraji said. This can be, made into like, parts, and can be focused for the benefit of young students, sir, particularly because they don't know either that or this. So she has to knit a garland, lilies and roses. Sir, nice to see you, sir. Nice to see you. So
I know,
all the
it's
best.
wonderful to
sir.
see you, Professor Madhavan. Yeah.
Yeah, that is
Long live you, because you will have to do a lot of
Yeah,
service to philosophy.
yeah.
Okay,
And
okay,
you-
thank you.
Long life.
And
And wonderful
nice.
to see you, Professor SREEKALA. When are we going to hear you?
Already mine was over last time.
Oh, it's over.
It's over.
Sir,
And my namaskar.
she spoke on the town planning,
Town planning.
the issues in the town planning that we face nowadays, and the revisiting Arthashastra.
I thought that it was postponed because you were unwell. I saw that, but I thought
No. Yeah.
that's why I did not join.
And namaskars to Misraji, also very scholarly person. His presidential remarks were real. Today's both of your combination is complementary to each other. That's nice. Today dais is beautiful, sir. well decorated. Thank you, sir.
Professor Misraji is having some bias towards Shankara philosophy.
Of course, sir, everyone. But for argument's sake, that is different issue. Shankaras is universal, sir. Universal. Because Ramchandra sir told Advaiti doesn't have enmity with anyone.
No,
So
I
that
told
way,
it has a positive element.
Yes, that way, everyone has to ultimately land into Advaita only.
Shankara.
Nadinam Sagaro Gati. Shankara.
Madam, we have a participant from Simla, Dr. Jagadish Sharma. He wanted to ask something.
Please.
Jagadish, please. You can directly ask.
Dr. Jagadish.
He has written some remarks in the chat box.
Actually, I'll have a look.
अत्र या चर्चा विहिता सा तु दार्शनिक रीत्या अत्युत्तमा वर्तते मया श्रुतं सर्वं परन्तु य पक्ष अत्र स्थापितः स तु पाश्चात्य दार्शनिक व्याख्यया सम्पूरितः वर्तते। नमो नमः। व्याप्ति पक्षे दार्शनिक रीत्या या चर्चा कृता सा अतीव मन आह्लादकारी वर्तते।
What Sharma told that it is that the discussion that you have made on Vyapti was fantastic.
That I understood, but then what is the
It
question?
is an appreciation. There is no question he has raised. It is only an appreciation. That's all.
If he has a question, ask him to write it in the chat box. He can write it in Sanskrit also. No problem.
अत्युत्कृष्ट आंग्ल भाषया या व्याप्ति चर्चा कृता दार्शनिक रीत्या पदार्थानां
Sharmaji, no problem, because our professor can understand Sanskrit also.
Yeah. Go ahead.
only Sanskrit.
Yeah. Go ahead. Speak in Sanskrit. आप संस्कृत में बोलिएगा.
या तो वर्तते व्याप्ति पक्षे या चर्चा कृत.
I think
problem in line.
Yeah,
He can write it in chat box, no, so that we can read.
But he is not asking any question. He is actually expressing his views. He is appreciating your
If it is just
lecture.
appreciation, leave it. Is there a question that I can answer by youngsters?
You can ask other people if they want. Yes.
I have two questions to ask. One is, would you explain Swalakshana and Samanya Lakshana a little bit? Because so far it's not clear to me. That's one thing. Another is often we heard people saying that especially Westerners, Indians do not have a philosophy. And here what we do is we use all the Western parameters to understand Indian philosophy. In their eyes, they are using all the parameters to study a non-existent thing. How is it possible? If Indians do not have a philosophy, what is the purpose? What is the purpose of using Western parameters to study
I
Indian
understand.
philosophy?
Yeah. Thank you. What's your
How
name?
do they solve this problem?
I understood. What's your name, beta? Ajitan.
Ajitan.
Professor Srikalan, do you remember Dr. Ajitan was a specialist in Tantra Shastra, and he has done commendable work in research in our department.
Okay.
And at present, he is a faculty of
I don't
Kanpur
remember
Shala.
him. I don't remember him.
Yeah.
Where is he now? Where is he now?
Irinjalakuda now.
Irinjalakuda.
Though I have seen you several times, this is the first time I listened to your talk. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So Ajitan, the first question is selection and Samani election. So you see, the Buddha, since they subscribe to this Kshanikavada, so the theory is that Sarvam Kshanika. So the real is the momentary. So if the real is the momentary, then you can have only immediate perception. See, if you don't understand, please stop me and ask me. So perception has two entities in it. What is perception and conception? Perception is when, in Indian terms, if I were to say, the self contacts the mind through the senses, and it travels out, grasps the object, comes back, and all. See, so what happens is this immediate meeting with the object. In Nyaya Shastra, for instance, Indriyartha Sandhikasha Janyam Jnanam Praktiksha. So this Indriya and Ardha, when they meet, this is that immediate contact the self, the phenomenal self, has with the world. This is what is perception according to them. Finish. And there should not be a conceptual side to it. If there is a conceptual side, what happens is you are constructing a world. And Buddha theory is that what you understand through conception is the constructed world. What we call that Madhyamakas beautifully speak about it. How the constructed world, Advaitins also speak about this. The constructed world, how you raise a world on your own by your imagination. It is your sankalpa. It is through your construction with your own tools, you create a world as you feel like. For instance, Ishtika, for instance, if you take a brick, it can be a brick for someone, it can be a stone for someone, it can be something else for someone. See, the object, the immediate perception gives what is the information about the object in the moment. So this is what is called swalakshana. And samanya lakshana is when these conceptual categories are applied to this raw material, and then you come up with a judgmental proposition in language. And that doesn't represent the reality. That is only your conception. That is what is called, there is a famous term.
Is that equal to Savikalpa and Nirvikalpa?
No. Savikalpaka and Nirvikalpaka is what you see it where you have, they say that there is no such distinction. Baudas are severe critics of this Savikalpaka and Nirvikalpaka.
In Savikalpa also you have these mental constructions.
Savikalpaka Pratyaksha is where you have things put in language.
Just bare knowledge.
See,
Actually, there the adjectives are there in Savikalpaka.
That is it.
But in
Nirvikalpa,
there is no
Dravya, etc. are there.
That is it.
Yeah, that is there.
Yeah, when you say
the word Vikalpa stands for that.
So you have, when you see Didhoyam, Brahmanoyam, see, when you see something ahead standing, you do not know. Something exists. So all that you can predicate is existence, nothing other than that. In Nirvikalpaka. In Savikalpaka, you are definite. So Didhoyam, Brahmanoyam, you know what it is. And you are coming out judgmental. But in Swalakshana and Samanya Lakshana, this is linking on to their metaphysics, and they say that Perception is only immediate. Immediate awareness of the object, which is non-conceptual, non-linguistic, alone is perception. And whatever that is mediate, wherever your construction is involved, where your subjective transactions are involved, that doesn't represent the phenomenon. To your second question, what is so the second question, you are saying that the Westerners say that there is no philosophy here. Then why are they applying their tools to understand something? All that. There are two problems here. Yes, they said that there is no philosophy here. And even now, if you look at Western schools, Professor Madhavan knows, most of them have Indian philosophy under the religious category. It has been put under religion. Even to this day, they think that Indian philosophy is nothing but religion. Yeah, I have a lot to say about this, but I restrict. Probably we can have a private chat. When Indologists, they try to understand Indian philosophy, they try to read the text, they try to learn it as a part of culture. They never thought that it was philosophy. It is we who use the Indian tools. We are Indians, right? So we use the Western tools, particularly, those series of philosophers whom I have referred. Shivjivan, Matilar, all of them. All of them are targeting the Western audience, starting with S. Radhakrishnan, trying to delineate the epistemology and the ontology. Yes, all that I've said. Yes, that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you. There are no other questions, we can wind up, Ajita. We
Any
can
other
push people to ask.
questions, then we can wind up.
No,
Okay.
We can move to another, next program, giving presentation of citation.
Yeah. So
That Jagadishan has sent a question in the chat box.
Nirvikalpake
Nirvikalpake khalo sati jivite.
Jivite.
Do we have Nirvikalpaka in life? Is that what he is asking?
Yes,
Is that what he is asking?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yes.
He has written
Nirvikalpaka, is it? Nayayika say yes, but Bauddha says you can't have such divisions, Nirvikalpaka and Savikalpaka. But you have these examples of perception where you have vague perception and you have definite perception, where you predicate only existence to something, that is Nirvikalpaka. And that famous example that we often tell our students, that as you go into a theater, you don't see anything, and then subsequently then things are clear and so on and so forth. I suppose Jivita, you can have such examples, but then philosophically it is feasible, is another question. Bauddhas, it is as per their ontology. If they don't find it useful, then they scrap it. Yes.
So there is nothing to ask or comment on. We will move on to our next program. It's a presentation of citation to Dr. Srikala Nair by Lisha Seer. I invite Lisha Seer for that.
Okay, thank you, sir. Good evening to all. First of all, I express my sincere gratitude to Professor Murali Madhavan sir for giving me an opportunity to like this. And I express my thanks to the members of Kandalushala and all present here. With great honor and respect, Kandalushala highly commends Professor Srikala M. Nair for her outstanding contribution and exemplary work in Vedic literature as a Sanskrit scholar, writer, teacher, guide, and philosopher. Professor Srikala M. Nair is the Director, International School for Sri Shankara Studies and Professor, Department of Philosophy, Sri Sankaracharya University of Sanskrit, Kalady. She has served this university in various capacities, both academic and administrative, since the time of its inception. Formerly worked as professor at the School of Buddhist Studies at Nalanda University. She has held prestigious positions like member of Indian Council of Philosophical Research, New Delhi, Joint Secretary, Indian Philosophical Congress, member NACPIA team, member of Board of Studies, Faculty and Academic Council of various universities, among others. Some of the honors or awards she received are first rank and gold medal for MA Philosophy in Sri Satyasai Institute of Higher Learning, Andhra Pradesh, 1988. ICPR Young Scholar Award in the national level competition in 1992. Best State Coordinator Award of Bharatiya Mahila Darshanika Parishad 2007. Shastri Indo-Canadian Fellowship awarded by Shastri Indo-Canadian Institute 2012 and the Best Paper Award in the 4th Annual International Conference of PYTT held in Singapore in 2016. She has authored a book titled Analysis of Knowledge, Classical and Contemporary Approaches, co-edited 2 other volumes and has published over 60 research papers. 4 research projects were undertaken by her and has produced 8 PhDs and 46 MPhils. She has participated and presented papers in over 300 seminars, conferences, workshops, and also delivered several lectures in educational institutions across the globe. More than 50 academic seminars or conferences or workshops, lecture programs were organized by her in India. Dr. Nair has visited several foreign countries like Canada, USA, Greece, Singapore, Malaysia, and China to deliver academic talks or present papers in conferences. Her areas of primary scholarly interest are contemporary epistemological issues, Buddhist philosophy, philosophy of religion, Indian philosophy of language, contemporary analytic metaphysics, consciousness studies, cultural studies, and Indian aesthetics. This citation is presented to Professor Srikala M. Nair on Saturday, 27th November 2021 at Thiruvananthapuram. Signed by Professor P.C. Murali Madhavan, Director in Charge, Kandalur Shala. Thank you all.
So much. I'm honored.
Thank you.
So let us conclude. To express vote of thanks, I would like to invite Vanaja VS. Vanaja VS.
Thank you, Dr. Achitan. Respected dignitaries of this program, a warm good evening to one and all. We gather here for the 10th National Lecture Series on Indian Intellectual Tradition, organized by Kantalur Shala. My beloved teacher, Professor P.C. Murali Madhavan Sir, the backbone of this program, the Director-in-Chief Kantalur Shala, is present here. Even he is being advised to take a rest due to his illness by the physicians. He's the person who is always with us in each and every academic programs. You are the role model and strength for the new generation, sir. On behalf of the entire gathering, I extend our sincere gratitude to him. Presidential address for today's program has been delivered by the great academician, Professor Godabarisha Mishra, Professor, Indian Institute of Technology, Bhubaneswar. I extend our sincere gratitude to him. Thank you so much, sir, for being with us. And of course, we have a great philosopher and academician today, Professor Srikala M. Nair, Professor of Philosophy, Sri Sankaracharya University of Sanskrit, Kalady, and former professor of Nalanda University, who has delivered a beautiful and in-depth lecture on Indian epistemology in conversation with its Occidental counterpart, problems and prospects. I extend our sincere gratitude to Dr. Srikala M. Nair on behalf of Kantalur Shala and entire participants. I extend sincere gratitude to our energetic teacher, Dr. Sarita Maheshwaran, head of the Department of Sahitya, Government Sanskrit College, Tripunithura, for her wholehearted support. We have a Professor Pradeep Jyoti, sir, with all his energy and support for this program. Thank you so much, sir, for being with us. Dr. Achitan PI, faculty, Kantalur Shala, and also my dear friend, has delivered a beautiful welcome address. Citation presentation to Dr. Srikala M. Nair has been done by Lieutenant Lisha, Assistant Professor, Sri Sankaracharya University of Sanskrit, Kalady. Thank you, both of you. On behalf of the Kantalur Shala, I extend our sincere gratitude to the discussants, participants, and well-wishers of this program. Many scholars all over India are attending this program. Once again, thank you, one and all.
Thank you.
So the program is over. Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Namaste.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ajidan.
So there is a Shanti Patha.
Shanti Patha.
Bhadram karnebhi shrunuyama deva bhadram pashyemakshabhiryajatraha sthirairange stushtuvam sastanubhirvyashema devahitam yadayuhu. Thank you.
Om Shanti.
Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.
Thank you, Dr. Ajitan. Your wonderful management of the session is highly
Thank-
appreciable. And
Thank you, sir.
thanks for everything. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Dr. Jyoti, there is no need of mentioning thanks for you. You are the pivot of all these things, pivotal to all these things. Thank you
Thank
all.
you, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
all.
Thank you.